Hi, everyone. I'm Frank Mallicoat. I'm an anchor reporter for KTVU Fox 2 here in the San Francisco Bay Area. My guest is the CEO of Cardinal Education. It's a Silicon Valley-based company that tutors and preps students for high school, college, and beyond. And he's here to talk about a new phenomenon. You may have heard about it, school pods or micro schooling. Let's say hi to Allen Koh. Allen, good to have you with us.
Frank, great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Before we dive into these school pods, why don't you give us a little background on Cardinal Education?
Sure. So Cardinal Education is a global educational consulting firm. We specialize in admissions, tutoring, and test prep. And we work with a very affluent clientele across 6 continents. And so we've been at the forefront of developing custom solutions for families looking for a way to navigate these COVID times.
Yeah, admissions, I bet, are getting a little tricky. We may go down that road a little bit, but let's dive into school pods because this kind of fascinates me. With all the distance learning, families that can't afford it have been hiring, I guess, tutors or teachers that teach pods of kids. Tell us about it.
So there are a variety of definitions of pods, right? So for some parents, they're calling pods basically at homeschooling, and they're opting out of the school system for this year. For us, the way we're defining pods are substantial time to help kids supplement their academics, usually with other children to get the socialization that comes from physical school. So for instance, a lot of schools have free time during the day in between their classes. This is a perfect time for a pod instructor to be working with a small group of children to simulate a classroom collaborative environment to work on the lessons they just learned. And then after school, pods transition to sometimes supplemental academic help, but a lot of times in this day and age, fun activities. So for instance, we have a lot of former Division I athletes who are looking for work. And so as pod instructors, they're also doing world-class athletics with these children. And so different families have different needs. Some families want people who are well-versed in the arts, for instance. And so pods, essentially, they answer, how can we address the shortcomings of school in these difficult times by providing a lot of support and ideally doing it with multiple children to provide some level of socialization.
Now, is this in addition to being homeschooled at whatever school you go to, or is it taking the place thereof?
It is largely supplementing schooling. We have actually been discouraging families to consider the homeschooling option.
Mhm.
It takes a tremendous amount of time and effort and planning and experience, frankly, to run a homeschool. And so it's better to stick with a school. And especially for many private schools, if you leave, you won't be able to come back easily.
How big are the pods?
For pods, we think the optimal size is about 3 students. It really depends on behavior. At most, you could probably take 6 in a home setting. Otherwise, the discipline issues, the familiarity, it'll be hard to keep a positive, productive environment.
And age group, are we talking high school kids or could it be second and third graders?
Pods are actually the most popular with elementary school kids because parents are most worried about socialization for elementary school students. And plus, elementary school students, they need more supervision during the day so that parents can focus on work.
And are they normally kids from one community, or could, I guess with Zoom, you can bring them from all over the country together, right?
So Frank, we're actually implementing 2 kinds of pods. There are virtual pods, and then there are physical pods. So for virtual pods, we actually want to engage with students with at least 2 cameras. All right, this prevents distractions like cell phones and things like that. And for physical pods, though, what we're doing is we're basically quarantining. We're finding families and we're matching them with our consultants and our tutors who have similar values in terms of social distancing and, similar thoughts on COVID.
Gotcha. Now, how about the teachers? Who are these teachers and where are they getting them?
We have an incredible range of people applying right now. We have teachers and substitute teachers who want to opt out of the system because they don't feel that their school district or school system is going to protect them adequately. We have some people who don't really have experience in education, but have a lot of experience in related fields, such as like STEM or psychology, or a deep-seated experience in a certain field. And we're specifically recruiting a lot of former collegiate athletes because a nightmare scenario that is happening right now is sports are being canceled effectively for the rest of this year. And when you have a country full of youth not physically active, it's actually going to lead to a massive wave of depression and anxiety. And so we're trying to incorporate other activities into our pods beyond simple academics.
Oh, that's great. Let me ask you this. I have a friend who lives down on the peninsula. She was a substitute teacher, pseudo retired. She threw it up on Nextdoor. She had over 100 people call her or email her to become or be interviewed as a pod teacher. So these are pretty popular, I guess.
So they are very popular. I would caution people who are running these pods to understand what they're getting into. There are some families who are not really willing to make a commitment. And so as a firm, we have a responsibility first to our clients, but also to our staff. And if we're making a job offer, it's with the good faith intention of keeping them. But for a lot of families, they are just exploring. And so a pod position could be very temporary.
What's the most common request for a pod instructor?
Someone who has a lot of energy, who actually wants to interact with the kids, play games, play hide and seek, actually like get active. And that is the number one thing I think wearing down working parents. And so that is a primary request.
Maybe a little patience too.
Oh, I mean, that goes without saying. We wouldn't ever.
You got a bunch of second graders. My goodness, I can only imagine. How much does it cost?
So our pods, they start at $80 an hour for super simple vision, simple supervision. And so people can add students, and there are nominal fees for adding students. But then there are so that there are supervisory pods, and then there are instruction pods. So instruction pods require a much higher talent level, much more training. And so those start at $150 an hour, and prices go up depending on how many students are there.
Do you think it's going to kind of further the divide between kind of the haves and the have-nots? Because obviously some families can't afford it. Inner city and low-income families are not going to be able to do this. I'm just curious what your reaction to that is.
So what I would say is this entire country is under siege academically, and even affluent school students are not immune whatsoever. We're actually very concerned about the state of education in this country. So I actually reject that this is a privileged student versus underprivileged student issue. This is actually an American issue, because what we're seeing is that some of the most affluent public schools on the peninsula, some of the most affluent private schools in the world, in about 3 months of schooling, they cut out about a chapter of math. And so the thing is, if you miss content in certain subjects, it doesn't really matter as much. But in math, there's something called math discouraged. And this is the term for when students are struggling with math for so long they give up. What we're worried about is this will completely block millions of people from being able to access the middle class, because math is a prerequisite for a lot of good paying jobs, like registered nurse, for instance. If you don't have algebra, you can never get to the statistics and the chemistry and the physics to be a registered nurse. And that is one of the best guaranteed jobs for the middle class in this country. And so even at the affluent schools, this is a crisis. So to make it all about social class, I think everybody is struggling. Ultimately, Frank, we're going to put it out there first. There needs to be a destigmatization about repeating a year of school. Because fundamentally, we do think a lot of parents and teachers have a misguided compassion where they are letting students slide with much lower standards. But when they finish their schooling, all of these students have to compete against everyone else who's taken all of these courses.
Do you think they're here to stay? Lord knows when we're going to have the kids back in school and we get back to some sense of normalcy again, but these are pretty popular. And if people can get a lift, what do you think?
I think pods are here to stay, but they will wane in popularity dramatically. I mean, we think they're a fad. We're leaders in creating pods and thinking about pods and delivering them to families, but we don't think this is a significant permanent part of our business. At the end of the day, families have a lot of other options in terms of entertainment that COVID is preventing them from accessing. If there's a vaccine or if the tide just turns in terms of how people feel about social distancing, pods will be a casualty.
All right, let's move forward. And we're talking more elementary school kids, but you obviously prep kids in high school and college to move better and beyond. Say you're a senior this year and you're distance learning much of the year, if not the entire year. How is that going to affect getting into the college of your choice?
So we actually think seniors have a lot of opportunity this year. Colleges are reeling, and so there's a lot of forgiveness out there. And so if I were seniors, if you're a senior and you're studying for the SAT, even though it's optional, if you are trying to do something with your extracurricular activities, even though many options are shut down, you will be rewarded tremendously this year, unlike previous years. And so, Frank, I think a lot of seniors are despairing, but we're encouraging students to think methodically. If they can't afford a college consultant, maybe there's a family friend or a parent that they could just drop a plan. How can I differentiate myself from everyone else? What are just a few things I can do or a few hours I can spend every week? And then you'll have a great story to tell. Because a lot of families are planning on telling colleges what they would have done. That is not going to fly.
So in other words, roll with it, so to speak, and
Absolutely.
make something out of it.
Absolutely. And for students who are trying hard right now, the opportunities for financial aid, if you distinguish yourself by working harder than your peers, it could be life-changing, the opportunities that come your way.
Yeah. So this really is a teaching moment for the kids and a bit of a challenge too.
Frank, we think this is a great teaching moment for a lot of parents, kids, and families. All right. After the initial shock of COVID, the place where we've come to is we're asking parents to have tough conversations with their kids about being more positive, having more gratitude, and pitching in. Families need to look forward, and for parents, getting their kids to stop focusing on what they're missing and helping them to adapt to these times. That is the proactive and positive measure that they can take. And as a society where we are culturally right now, as parents want to remove all the pain from their children, this is literally impossible now. And so the proactive step is to engage your children, to be honest, and to ask them to elevate and help out and be a cohesive family.
I was going to ask you if you had advice for parents, but I think that's part and parcel right there. Any other things you'd tell parents that are maybe struggling working from home, or maybe they are going to work and they've got 2 or 3 little ones from 2nd to 7th grade struggling with this?
So one is, Frank, I think a lot of parents will get there in terms of not negotiating with their children as much. All right. if everything turns into a negotiation, especially if you're in close proximity with your children all day long, it will be impossible to live with them for long. So parents will have no choice but to evolve. So people can choose the positive route of proactively having these conversations, or they can wait. But inevitably, we do believe it will happen.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, it's fascinating. All the changes in our world and these pods, well, they've kind of come out of nowhere, but I think they're here to stay, at least for now. Allen Koh, if people want to get in touch with you and find out more about Cardinal Education, how do they do it?
That they can look us up on our website, cardinaleducation.com, and we're happy to talk to people.
And a proud Stanford grad, I might add, right?
Very much so.
Okay. I'd throw in a Go Bears, but I don't think it's apropos here. So at any rate, Allen, a pleasure to meet you. All the best. And as we all move forward, Allen Koh, he's the CEO of Cardinal Education. Allen, thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
All
Stay
right.
safe.